December 7th, 1941, a day that would live in infamy. At 7:55 a.m., the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and officially brought the United States into the Second World War. 82 Army nurses were stationed there, with an additional 13 Navy nurses aboard the USS Solace. As the war machine turned, the 1,000 Army nurses and 800 Navy nurses prepared for the worst. Some of them were soon to endure the hell that was Batang and similar prisoner camps. The Navy and Marines prepared to cross the Pacific, while the Army and Army Air Corps geared up for a global fight, and a new force would mobilize, one that would not return to the status quo again. Massachusetts Representative Edith Norris Rogers would introduce the legislation Hotel Romeo 6293 that would sign into action the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, and on May 15th, the bill was signed and women returned to the Army. 2 months later, President Roosevelt would sign the Navy Women's Reserve Act on the 30th of July. This bill would bring the waves to the lower 48 states and non-combatant roles. This technically also brought into action the Marine Reserves, though that would not happen until December of 1942 following the catastrophic casualty rate of Guadalcanal. The last to have their ink dry were the Warcogs, as the Coast Guard also accepted women. Thankfully renamed the spars by their first director, Dorothy Stratton, they would help monitor the shores and help man the lighthouses. These reserves were as different then as the branches are today. The WACs deployed overseas to almost every front of the war, while the Waves were able to hold lateral ranks equal to their male sailor counterparts. Both the spars and the WMR would borrow from the Waves in their early years. 15 officers and 153 enlisted Waves were moved over to the spars after governmental request. The Marines would take everything they learned from their joint service training with the Waves down to North Carolina, where they consolidated female training. Women were here to stay, even if the government hadn't figured it out yet. See, they thought they had learned their lesson from the last war and had all contracts for the duration rather than the 4-year contracts they had in World War I. However, many women would continue to serve long after VJ Day happened. And lest we forget, though many do, the women who took to the skies in defense of our country. More than 1,000 women made up the Wasps and Waves, pilots who flew, ferried, and trained male pilots to serve. They were never officially assimilated into the armed forces and would dissolve only a year after their formation. It would take another 3 decades before they gained veteran status.